Hello and welcome to the CBB Supershow, brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, also known as the Niche Sports Connoisseur. We are approaching March Madness, full swing into February. Here we go. We're going to be talking about the 12-game main slate over on DraftKings, starting at 9 a.m. on the West Coast. Lots to get into, a great slate, a ton of fantastic games. We just grinded through that little ugly three-gamer with the defensive battles and the low scores. This slate likely will be very high scoring, so you got to bring your best. If you're watching this for the first time, as in the Super Show, welcome. What we do here is cover college basketball from a DFS and prop betting perspective. We talk about everything to do with DraftKings, a little bit of FanDuel, PrizePicks, and any betting opportunities that we have. Our man Mike Randall, who does the betting show in the morning, he is also a total genius at this stuff. Our college basketball team in general, the prop master himself, Mike Kutry. Get on over there and check us out at ftndaily.com and FTN Bets. Appreciate those of you who have been checking out the show and have been loyal viewers or subscribers in our community for a long, long time. All of you come together, help us out, hit that like button. I hate to beg for likes. I always thought it was a lame thing to do, but since we've been asking it and you guys have made it a focus, it has really helped the program, as they say, and the Super Show in general has really risen the ranks of not only the channel for FTN, but also college basketball in general. So appreciate you guys helping us out with that. Continue to do so. If you're watching live or on demand, make sure you're interacting in the chat or posting comments. I always circle back around to make sure I answer those questions, comments, and concerns, and also chat with you throughout the show as well. Now, those of you who have been following me for a while know I got a million kids, 4. And lately they've been sick. So the reason I had to go on a little bit later tonight, I was feeling extremely nauseous before. I don't know why, just kind of random. And so I've been kind of ill lately. I feel like I'm always sick, and I'm trying to go over it with the March Madness grind coming up here. I can't afford to be sick. There's no days off for me, as you guys know. So I am going to continue to grind through regardless of how I feel. We're going to go through this game by game, talking about our favorite options, top options, anyone that looks to be overpriced, underpriced, sneaks, chalk projections, all of that good stuff, the type of content that we have at FTN, not only written content for every main slate every single day, but also now posting projections for every single slate. So for Saturday example, you have main, afternoon, and night slate. There will be projection sheets for all of them. There will be an article for the main slate and, of course, the show covering this one as well. I also provide player pools and cores in the Discord. Everything you could possibly need to be a competitive and successful CBB DFS player, it is offered here. The only thing we don't have is an optimizer just yet, but give me a little bit of time working on that. Maybe into next season, we'll have that for the one-stop shop, everything CBB. On DraftKings for the 12-gamer, there are a couple of qualifiers for the Mania going on. You got the $60, 134 entrant qualifier number 28. And then there's qualifier number 29 at the $250 level. That'll probably be filled early, maybe even overnight. There's just 37 entrants to that one. 19 people already in it. If you haven't qualified for a seat to Mania, it'll always be Mania to me. Definitely a lot of opportunities to still do so. We're only getting into the 28th and 29th. You still have more than half the seats still available. Fun one to do. Lots of community members from FTN are in it already. Love to see it. Also, the mini max. This is, I believe, the third straight Saturday with the $1 mini max, 150 entries. Been messing around with the MME stuff, showing my exposures and all that. So I will certainly be doing that again. And then, of course, the flagship tournament, the $15 pull-up jumper, the jam. We'll just call it that. I'm old school. 5K to first. I know some of you guys don't get out of bed for anything under 10K, but 5K to first, that'll do. And then there is the, I believe, what is it? The 222, which is 2.5K to first, 40 entries. Pretty good little odds there. Top heavy tournaments, which is the DK way. All right. Because of the fact that it's going to be a long night for me, and again, I'm feeling a little bit off, we're going to try and speed through this without affecting the quality, but we're going to enhance that efficiency, and we're going to rattle on through here as best as we can. So let's start off with the first game of the slate. I also have the heater going on under my desk here. If that affects the sound quality at all, it seems to when I have guests, please just go ahead and mention that in the chat and I will turn it off. Right now, we're nice and toasty. We're feeling good, but if that impacts the quality or the sound, we'll definitely turn it off and I'll just freeze. No problem. All right, first game on the slate, Alabama versus LSU. Bama 6-point favorites. Now the total, get ready for this, 166 points. The highest total on the slate, and that's to be expected. You're talking about an Alabama team here under Coach Oates. They're a little bit lackadaisical when it comes to their defensive abilities this year, but still 16th in tempo, number 2 in adjusted offensive efficiency per Ken Palm. This is a squad built to score. They gave up 99 points to Auburn the other night, though our guy Janai Broome just absolutely blitzed them. Jalen Williams, Trey Donaldson. They scored 81, but gave up a ton of points. They are just defensively challenged this year, and the type of style that they play tends to lead to the other team scoring, especially if they get hot or they're forcing turnovers. LSU, nothing special on offense or defense. They're 12-10, but they do play at the 56th fastest tempo in the country. So you're talking about a team here that's also going to oblige Alabama by playing extremely fast. They recently got absolutely waterboarded by Tennessee, 88-68. Gave up a big score there. They did blow out Arkansas at home, 95-74 recently. But last time they played Alabama, which was only 2 Saturdays ago, they gave up 109 points, and that was on Bama's floor. In that game, Aaron Estrada scored 18 points, dropped 7 dimes. Mark Sears got to the foul line 11 times, made all 11, 21 points, 5 assists. A nice little game there. Latrell Wrightsell had 19. Grant Nelson had 12 and 5. Rylan Griffin had 12 and 4, but he fouled out there in 18 minutes. Would have done much better if he hadn't. And then bench-wise, Muhammad Diabate had 8 points. Sam Walters hit a 3, had 7. On the LSU side, they went with a pretty deep rotation there, losing, 109-88. They did end up playing 9 to 10 guys, all 11-plus minutes. This was before Trey Hannibal inserted into the starting lineup as well. That was a recent change there with Jalen Cook going to the bench. In this one, Mike Williams had 16 points, 3 rebounds. Will Baker, 12 and 4. Nobody really else had a notable stat line except for Derek Fountain off the bench. He had 14 and 6. The recent change for LSU, like I said, was putting Trey Hannibal into the starting lineup. Since doing so, back on February 3rd against Arkansas, he has been phenomenal. 6 points in 29 minutes, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals. Followed that up in the loss to Tennessee with 31 minutes, 8 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 steals. So Trey Hannibal has just been filling it up on the peripheral side of things, has been playing really well. Now, last year and beyond, Hannibal was getting spot starts, and he was always fairly productive. His price has, of course, gone up with these 2 games of 23 and 30. He's up to 5.5 now, but still very much in play, especially if we expect him to continue to play 30-plus minutes, and I think that will be the case. Now, Jalen Cook comes into this one with a questionable tag, dealing with a hamstring issue. Makes a little bit more sense why, he didn't end up starting in the Arkansas game. He ended up playing, which kind of messed us up because I was super high on Cook. I know a lot of you were. We had to bounce off of him, and he ended up having a really nice game. Didn't play at all against Tennessee, and as pretty much a game time decision for this one. So we'll see what happens. Either way, he's not going to be starting, and he's really not a option for us, even in a matchup against Alabama, which would have been a really good opportunity for him to cook. If he's out, Trey Hannibal at 5-5 starting, playing 30-plus minutes is certainly one of the better plays on this LSU team. Now, Jordan Wright, priced at 7-7. He'd been up to 9K. That was a no-go. Struggled against Tennessee. Without Jalen Cook, he's going to absorb a lot of that usage there if it does come down to it. We're talking 15, 16, maybe even 20 shots. Certainly a good look there. He didn't have the best game against Alabama. He was stuck with major foul trouble throughout. Definitely still a risk, and at 7-7, it is a price point that is going to be tough for me to really justify because there are 3, 4, 5 other games on the slate that there's guys projecting at 4.5, 5x, like super high. This is going to take a 300-plus score to win on this slate. I'm pretty sure about that because of these matchups. So the 7-7 for Jordan Wright puts him in play, but he's certainly not, for me, a main play right now. But a lot of that will depend on how the lineup shakes out and what Jalen Cook's actual status is here for LSU. Looking at Wright, he's, giving him about, 30, 31 minutes. He's right around the 4x mark. Trey Hannibal is the one that we want at 5-5. Maybe Will Baker, who does project quite well for me right now at about 33 minutes. I don't personally, that's one of the ones where I'm kind of on the opposite side. I don't love Will Baker there. He didn't have a great game against Bama the first time. He did have a nice outing against Tennessee, played 35 minutes without Jalen Cook, 16-8 against Arkansas. In 32 minutes, he had 25 real points, hit 4 threes. He's only priced at 5.8, so I know why the sheet's going to project him well, but I am very leery and uneasy about Will Baker because we know how he can get into foul trouble easily or straight up disappear altogether from the game and play a lot of empty minutes. So I'm not as high on him as the projections will show, and when you see the sheet in the morning, you'll see that. As far as any other options, I suppose without Cook, we could look at Mike Williams. He only played 16 minutes against Tennessee. It was pretty awful. Still pretty young, pretty raw prospect. You do have Derek Fountain at 4-1, Tyrell Ward at 4-6. Certainly viable values playing 20-plus minutes in a matchup that they can do well in. Jalen Reed, same thing, 4-9. He didn't play many minutes against Tennessee, but 20 to 25 minutes against Alabama would put him into play there. But for the most part, I think I just want to play Trey Hannibal and move on. On the Alabama side, we always have to consider Mark Sears. They finally have him priced high enough to where it's a decision. For the last month and a half, it really hasn't been a decision. It's kind of just like you either, if you're running one lineup, you try to find a way to play Mark Sears. If you're running multiple lineups, you're going to want to have 25, 30% minimum. Now that he's priced at 8.8, it's not a lock and load price by any means. He is scoring at an extremely high clip. He is the majority of the Alabama offense. He has just been phenomenal. Priced at 8.1, 8.2, just way underpriced there. Still probably technically underpriced here at the 8.8 price point too. But again, there's so many other options on the slate. He's not a lock and load, but he is very high on my list. Number 8 on the Ken Palm Player of the Year rankings. Top 25 offensive rating across the country, 25% shot rate, 27% usage rate, 23% assist rate, and he's shooting 44% from long range while drawing 6.1 fouls per 40. That's something he's done very well in conference play. He has been able to generate offense you're still seeing him hit 20-plus real points because this is the man that is getting things done. At the end of games, he's the one being fouled in close ones, or he's just driving to the dish, generating offense any way he can. The 44% he's shooting from long range is a career high across 2 seasons with Ohio and last year with Alabama, where he shot just 34%. It was kind of a weird season for him, playing a second fiddle when he's used to being the alpha on Ohio. He comes back and he's an alpha on the team this year, and he's playing exactly the way we expected him to. Very, very good option. Aaron Estrada, who was phenomenal at Hofstra, he is starting to play like the guy that we expected him to be, going through some struggles in the early part of the season and into SEC play. I know that the game against Auburn, he was pretty awful. He ended up fouling out, couldn't make any shots, but you look at the previous 3 there against LSU, Georgia, Mississippi State, he was on point in all of them. 26 plus fantasy points. Last time against LSU, he put together 18, 6, and 7. Flirted with a triple-double there at 6'6". Gotta like him quite a bit. Sears is going to be harder for people to get to at 8'8". So a good way to get exposure to this game would be through Estrada, who priced at 6'6", playing 30-plus minutes, is a very solid option. I don't particularly love any of the cheaper guys. I'll usually Rylan Griffin at 5'4". That would be my guy I would be talking about if it's not Sears, but it's not that much more to Estrada to get him in. And Griffin has been kind of low upside, low ceiling lately. He's been getting into some foul issues. And aside from actually scoring, he's not giving us the peripherals that you'd like. So he is cheap, but I don't necessarily think he's all that great of a play here, even in a decent enough spot. Part of the reason being that he's sharing that role and those minutes with Latrell Wrightsell, who is giving us more of the peripherals that Griffin is not. Wrightsell's priced at 5'8". Again, get me to the 6'6" so I can play Estrada there. That's going to be more of the priority for me. Value-wise, Diabate at 4'8". It's okay. You saw he's kind of like Nick Pringle, like Alabama bigs. If they can stay on the floor, they can give us a lot. The problem is they can't stay on the floor. And Diabate had 4 fouls in only 9 minutes against Auburn. No match for Janai Broome. Against Mississippi State, the best game of his life. He played 19 minutes, had 2 blocks, 14 points, 9 rebounds, put up nearly 35. So you see the high water mark there, and then he followed that up with the low water mark against Auburn. He did score 15 fantasy points against LSU in their first meeting, had a block and a steal, a couple of assists, and 8 real points. 4'8", it's not the cheapest price for a value that we'd like, but he's at least in consideration. But you need to be aware fouls are a very likely scenario. Same thing with Nick Pringle. Pringle can't even reach the 20-minute mark lately because of his foul risk. Right now, there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's almost like they're riding the hot hand when it comes to non-Mark Sears, non-Aaron Estrada, and non-Grant Nelson players in the rotation for Alabama. Speaking of Grant Nelson, he's priced at 6'9". I don't mind him when he's below 7K. I have the issue with him when he's priced up higher above 7K. I don't think he's the best option against upper-tier competition. He is getting an LSU team he's capable of performing against, but I don't think he'll rebound very well against that athletic LSU front court. He will be taking shots, we know that, but he's also a guy who's fouled out in back-to-back games, and that has been an issue for him lately. Back against LSU, he was in 23 minutes, just 12 points, 5 rebounds, so didn't have the best game against them. Now going on the road, it's 300 less for Aaron Estrada. I keep harping on Aaron Estrada. Play Aaron Estrada if you're not playing Mark Sears. All right, moving on to the next game here, Yukon versus Georgetown. What's up with Ed Cooley, man? Ed Cooley goes from being like the coolest guy around, right, at Providence. Like, everybody likes Ed Cooley. DFS players like Ed Cooley, like, you know, Bryce Cotton, one of my heroes, all-time favorite college, one of my top 3 all-time favorite college basketball players. Guards under Ed Cooley, just like the best. The system is great. Run 6 guys. Like, how do you not love Ed Cooley? And then he, you know, that very interesting documentary who comes out and that kind of, you know, talks about him going to Georgetown. It's like, okay, yeah, it was kind of shitty, but whatever. Didn't really hold it against him. Thought it was weird. But the way he's acting, man, it's just, he's becoming the villain. And it's just that old classic line, like, you either die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain. And it seems like this arc for Ed Cooley is turning into the villain, and he's like embracing it, right? Like saying that he should be getting tipped for Providence fans being so excited at the Georgetown game. And then he's, you know, clapping back at kids who are heckling him at games. And I mean, geez, man, just take a chill pill, calm down, and just relax, brother. You're rich. We get it. But you are acting like a complete tool right now, and you are losing a lot of respect from people. I still like Ed Cooley. I like the way he coaches, but man, just Shut up. All right. Anyways, this game for Yukon versus Georgetown, it is a 16-point spread, total of 142.5. Now, Yukon guys are going to project well, but this is a spot, and I usually don't, you guys know, worry too much about blowout risk in college basketball, especially. I think it's a losing move overall to worry too much. Hey, what's up, Jody? Good to see you. Appreciate you checking in. Worrying about blowouts too much. When you do that, you miss out on phenomenal stat lines, leverage opportunities, because other people are programmed with the way that NBA and pro sports are. Blowout games, you got to have, either bench players from that, or you got to fade it. And that's the right move. I get it in pro sports. So people are wired that way when they play college basketball DFS, and you end up missing out on maybe a Tristan Newton 50 because, it was a blowout. But to get to that blowout, Tristan Newton had to put up 30 real points. So I typically don't worry about that. That is in my opinion, and it's not even really an opinion. You look at it and you see, and we can track it next year. We will, just so you guys can see. It's a losing move. This, however, is a game that I'm definitely concerned about. And because we have seen games in which Yukon completely detonates, they do have a tendency at times to pull guys out. So that is a bit of a worry for me. And it's a lot more to do with the fact that they're priced so high. Like the Xavier game, in which they won by like $1 million. We saw most of their starters play approximately 20 to 25 minutes. Now, Tristan Newton did have 22, 4 and 4 in that game, but the price that he's been lately, that would not be enough. And when you are talking about a stat line like that puts you easily and comfortably over 30, but you're still kind of like, that won't be enough. You only have to look at the 9-1 price and say, okay, maybe we can spend that money elsewhere. And that's not to say Tristan Newton isn't a good play, because he absolutely is. But the opportunity cost is what we have to look at here and see where we can spend our money. There are a ton of pay-ups on this slate that are absolutely phenomenal plays. Janai Broome against Florida, holy shit. Devin Carter against Butler. There's rumors about Josh Odoro not being available because of the birth of a child. Those are unsubstantiated rumors. The people who are talking about it are not your normal beat writers, so I can't confirm or deny what that is. I don't know for sure, but that's a thing going around Providence Twitter right now. You have Baylor Shireman and the Creighton guys versus Xavier in like a phenomenal matchup where everybody will score. Quincy Olivari, who I normally will never pay up for against Creighton, he might actually be the dude. PJ Hall against Syracuse, Josh Sears, Dylan DeSue against West Virginia. There are so many elite payups on this slate. It's going to be really hard, especially you single entry players out there, to pick just 8 guys that you can use, because inevitably you're going to be leaving somebody off your roster that's putting up 50. This slate's going to take a astronomically high number. So with that being said, Tristan Newton is good. He may still put up 35, but will that be enough compared to the other guys in his range who are maybe going to put up 40, 50 in closer games? So we have to think of it like that. Or you just be like me and play the mini max and get yourself about 15 to 20% Tristan Newton and call it good. Speaking of him at 9-1, gotta love him. Now against Butler, that game ended up being way closer than it should have been. Newton has these games where he just doesn't shoot well, and then he's disengaged from the rest of his game. So you saw him put up just 22.5 against Butler. He did have almost 50 against St. John's. So you can see the way he kind of ebb and flows in that way. But normally he's going to give you 34, 35 fantasy points. But again, that's it's technically value at his current price, but the cost there, I think we can get those points from either a cheaper option, or we can go to someone else in his range that will give us more raw points. Cam Spencer there at 8-2. I actually really like him. Nobody ever rosters Cam Spencer, but he's so habitually consistent in this offense with Dan Hurley. He's playing every single minute possible. Now, he only played 25 in their last blowout, which was against Xavier. But typically, if the game's going to be within 10 to 15 points, you're seeing him play 38, 39 minutes. He's just not leaving the floor. So there's a lot of safety there for Cam Spencer at 5'2", or 5'2", 8'2". 5'2" would be a steal, right? And he is one of my, I think, probably premier or preferred Yukon plays, which may surprise some people, just because you're getting a ton of leverage there with him, and he's so very good and masterful in this system. Now, Donovan Clingan at 7'4" is probably the best overall option here. He is a little bit more expensive than he has been, right? We've had him at 6'4" and 6'7" and 6'5". 28 minutes against Butler. That's what we're talking about. Klingon is such a high fantasy point per minute player. Great overall rates, elite rates. And typically we're getting him for like 18 to 20 minutes. He's putting up 30s in those 18 to 20 minutes. But when you give him something close to 30 minutes, then you see what he did against Butler. 18 points, 14 rebounds, 3 blocks on his way to 47 fantasy points. Now, he probably won't be needed to play 28 minutes against Georgetown unless they have a, outrageously good shooting start in the first half and are able to keep this game relatively close. That would be the best case scenario here. Ordinarily, I'm looking to do some mini stacks of Yukon in my various, multi-entry lineups. This particular slate, I don't know that I'll be able to get that. I will probably force a couple in there, but I won't be rostering as many Yukon stacks as I normally would just because the context of the slate, there are so many good options. And then you have Stephen Castle at 6'9", who was a big-time letdown against Butler. That hurt because he wasn't that highly owned, and he was one of the plays that I was fairly high on because he's been so solid at that price, $7K. Typically, I think he'll go back to putting up a nice 30 number here. 6'9" is a nice little depressed price compared to the rest of everybody else. Or you can go to Alex Caravan, who jumped right back into the fire there. 35 minutes against Butler. He didn't shoot particularly well. He didn't shoot that bad, but he didn't really contribute in very many categories. Only scored 16 fantasy points, and that gives us a price point of 6.7. If you are brave enough there, because I don't know that people will, Alex Caravan at 6.7 is a main team play worthy option and a Q play worthy option because he's in that range where you're typically landing for your last guy in, or you're ending up with this 2v2s that you're trying to find this, this combination that'll work that you'll be okay with. And Alex Caravan's usually not in that range when he's at 7.4, 7.5, but down at 6.7, that's a range we can get down with. And the fact that he played 35 minutes immediately tells us he's likely a lock for 30 plus minutes, as long as there's no setbacks. And he is certainly going to shoot more this time around and contribute more in those peripheral categories, normally a better rebounder as well. A lot of that had to do with Donovan Klingon playing so many minutes that took down some of his rebounds. I don't think Klingon plays those kind of minutes this time, and I think that we see Caravan put up a higher number here, somewhere closer to 30 fantasy points at minimum. Right now, I've got him at 33 minutes, which puts him right around 31 fantasy points, about a 4.5, 4.6 number. That's definitely solid. We would take that any day of the week. And then with him back, it doesn't really give us a value play for Hassan Diarra. He's there at 4.5. He played 20 minutes, did have 17. He's fine if you want to go there, especially if you think he gets a little bit more in a potential blowout. He only played 16 in the blowout against Xavier, so it's not as if he's going to get a ton more. You're probably talking about a 20 fantasy point upside. 4.5, though, you could do worse, especially if you're thinking that you don't want to pay up for any of the Yukon guys. On Georgetown, it's typically Jaden Epps or Supreme Cook. Sometimes Dontrez Styles steps up there, but I don't typically like paying for him. Epps is a pretty agreeable price at 8.1. I wouldn't mind paying that for him, but I do have the rule here. There's several teams that I just won't target against. Houston and now Virginia, after they've shown me they're not any longer giving up points to bigs. Those are two teams I really go out of my way not to roster against. Yukon isn't necessarily a team that I will fade against, just flatly without any context or any research behind it, but I'm typically not looking to take guys against them. That will probably keep me low on Epps, even though he has phenomenal rates, very high usage rate, plays every single possible minute for this team, and he's right into that classic Ed Cooley lead alpha guard role where he's just playing every minute. He is putting up these massive numbers. Like Epps is Cooley's guy. He just doesn't project that well, and it's Yukon. So, they're going to be able to shut him down. Their first matchup, they held him up to about 26, 27 fantasy points. Certainly not a horrible number at 8.1. He had 16 points, but he didn't really do much, had just 1 assist, shot 5 of 19. The volume's going to be there, but opportunity cost there makes that pretty tough to get behind. All right, moving on to the next game here. We've got Wisconsin versus Rutgers. Hey, SDP, Scott, that is Mania seat number 25, 20 winner SDP Solutions there. My man, it's been with me for a long time. Appreciate you. I wasn't feeling good before the show, but don't jump on here talking and hanging out with you guys. I feel great. Just live stream all the time. Wisconsin versus Rutgers, a game that will get ignored by the masses, and rightfully so. The Badgers 4-point favorites, but total 130.5, 30 plus points less than Alabama LSU. Now, there are some really attractive games on the slate. I've already talked about that, and you probably know which ones they are. This isn't so attractive or appealing, and that's going to leave it very, very low rostered by everyone. Now, Chucky Hepburn is finally priced up to a level where he won't project that well. Hopefully, won't project that well on a sheet. There's a couple of guys who, when I provide these projections, it always comes with a caveat because I haven't been a real heavy projections guy. I'm very, research and DVP and gut oriented. Like that's just my style. But now with the projections, I have a melded, taking plays from that, taking plays from my other, system, putting them together. And Hepburn has been somebody who has projected well the last couple of slates, but I always talk about like, I'm not using him. Like there's some guys who are just, they're priced right. And, this is technically a good matchup, but from experience with Chucky Hepburn, paying a price of nearly $6K for him, regardless of all those minutes he's playing and matchup, unless it's just like a super amazing matchup that he can't fail in. And even then it's 50-50 if he's going to perform. So at 6-4 against Rutgers, he's a pretty easy fade for me, and I'm happy to report he does finally project under 4X on the projection sheet. So that's good. The guy that we would want to normally look at is AJ Storr, but they've got him priced way up there, almost 7K. He's been a guy that we've been pretty high on throughout the season. Doesn't give us a ton peripheral-wise, but he is a high-usage guard. Tyler Wall is expensive at 7-4 as well. The cheapest of the main starters there, Stephen Crowell at 6'3". He put a very horrible number up against Michigan. He's been struggling with foul trouble. Nebraska, Purdue, everybody gets into foul trouble against Zach Edey and his ref friends. And the Michigan game, which was a loss for them, surprisingly, and also Crowell couldn't stay out of foul trouble. So his newfound fouling issues that he's had has caused his price to cascade down to 6'3". Would be somewhat interested there if they weren't on the road and he wasn't going up against Cliff Omarui and Rutgers at their house. That's a pretty tough order. Probably going to full fade Wisconsin here because of that. But Crowell, if he gets up to like 30 minutes, he certainly could pay off this price, but foul's certainly not doing him any favors right now. On the Rutgers side, it's basically Jeremiah Williams, who is priced at 5.5, gets the clearance here halfway through the season. A lot of people thought he should have just, sat out and kept the full red shirt, but they didn't, and they got him in there. Played 30 minutes in his first game, his debut, 21 fantasy points. Played 20 against Maryland, much tougher environment, 23 fantasy points. So we take that average, we put him about 25, 26, right around 20, 22 fantasy points. He's an okay play, not a great play by any means. I think people will look to roster him just because he is a name that at this point I think people recognize. He was very good at Temple. And he is somebody that they've inserted in the starting lineup immediately, and he's playing relatively big minutes. I think he would have probably played more against Maryland had he not picked up. I think the Maryland game, you guys will have to correct me if I'm wrong, he had 3 fouls in the first half, if I'm not mistaken. So big time loss of minutes in that first half there, which caused him to play just 20. I think we probably see him push ordinarily in a close game like this projects to be closer to 30 minutes. So he is somewhat interesting there and would be the only Rutgers guy that I would be considering. Omarui at 7-1 is a fine price. Derek Simpson at 5'6", a fine price, but it's really hard to peg. You see one game, he'll put up 38. The next, he's putting up 15. So I'm really only interested in Jeremiah Williams from this game altogether. All right, next game on the slate, Clemson versus Syracuse. Clemson 4.5-point favorites, total of 152.5. It's getting a little too toasty. We'll turn that off. This would be a game ordinarily I would be all over Clemson, high post against the zone, but we know under Coach Autry, they're not playing zone like that anymore. But still, this profile is a great matchup for Clemson overall. The Syracuse team are bleeding fantasy points to their opponents. They are playing at the 36th fastest tempo. Lots of points. They just were involved in that game with Louisville in which they needed some late heroics to beat them 94-92. Malik Brown had the sickest 50 you'll ever see. He scored 11 real points and put up 50 because his stocks number was ridiculous. 6 blocks, 5 steals. That is just silly. 11 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, which is fine. That's a great stat line on its own. But then you add 11 stocks to the mix, and it's like, whoa. Chris Bell also put up 30 real points because he hit 8 threes there. I suspect that people won't chase that. I'd love it if they would, but it's not something that we want to do here. JJ Starling played quite well all 40 minutes there, and then Judah Mintz played just 30. He did take a ton of shots there, but it wasn't a massive game there from Mintz that I was expecting. Mintz was also pretty low owned there. He was a core play for me. Did end up with 32, which was fine at 8-4, but I certainly expected him to put up a much bigger number. But when you're playing with superstars like Chris Bell and Malik Brown who are putting up 50s, I guess there's not a lot of leftover scraps there for Judah Mintz. Do like him at 8-4. Clemson's individual perimeter matchup is fair for him. I don't think he is a play many people will get to. He's much more of a luxury option there against Clemson, but we know he's usually going to be on the floor for a lot of minutes. The 30 was a little bit of a surprise to me. I think we see him get closer to 35, 36 here. JJ Starling not ever leaving the floor, priced at 6'2". It's fair for him. He doesn't have the peripherals that other guys do. He's mainly been a scorer lately, so it's harder to get behind him. Again, you have Chris Bell who's priced at 6'1". If people want to chase that, I would be really, really happy with that. He's a guy I don't even want to play at like 3'5", let alone 6'1". So I won't be using any of Chris Bell there. I don't suspect he's going to shoot 80% from long range once again. You see he shot 0 of 5 from Wake Forest, 0 for 2 against BC. He'll have games where he plays 15 minutes. Like, they rode the hot hand there, whatever. Benny Williams is dismissed from the program, so there's minutes available, but I can't imagine playing Chris Bell at 6'1". And if he goes off, then good on him and good on those who play him. Malik Brown is interesting still at 7'6". It's a high price for him, but I don't love it against Clemson. I think his rebounding number will suffer a little bit against that Clemson front court, especially with Ian Schiffelin playing the Hunter Tyson role. And also there are foul issues for Malik Brown. Playing 38 minutes there is a little bit more of an anomaly. He's typically getting into the early foul trouble, which they do play him much like Coach Boeheim did with 2 fouls, but you see he has an extremely high foul rate, and there's some risk there. 7'6" is enough to hurt you, especially if he puts up under 30 fantasy points. I still like Quadir Copeland. I think they'll probably keep starting Justin Taylor. I saw a couple of reports, or not reports, but people giving their opinions on Justin Taylor, how he would be a really good like mid-major level player. Like if he transferred to Niagara or something, he probably would be a stud there. Sometimes you just don't have it at this level. Played 24 minutes against Louisville, only 4 fantasy points. I think they continue to start him. He's in that 5th starter role, the 5th Beetle role, if you will. It's a dreadful spot to be in because you don't get the full minutes of a normal starter, and you also don't get the usage because you're the low man on the totem pole, even below Chris Bell. That's a tough scene. So Quadir Copeland comes off as a 6th man. You saw he played 30 minutes against Louisville. 11 points, 7 rebounds, 3 steals, 6'1", still a fair price for him. He has massive upside, and I actually do like him. Of all the Syracuse guys, I think Copeland is the sneakiest to use as a non-starter, but possibly playing the most minutes behind only JJ Starling. All right, on the Clemson side, some decisions to make because you have my man PJ Hall at almost 9K against a Syracuse team he can dominate against. However, PJ Hall on the road can sometimes be tricky because he has a tendency to get a little bit too aggressive and bodying guys. So we see PJ Hall picking up fouls left and right, and that is especially true on the road. That enables our guy Ian Schiffelin, who is doing his best impersonation of Hunter Tyson, who was extremely successful last year playing the Robin role to PJ Hall's Batman, and he parlayed that into a NBA contract with Denver. I don't know if he's still on Denver, but I know he started there. Don't follow NBA like that these days. But Ian Schiffelin, this is such a lucrative role that like nobody realizes, and the people that do are unwilling to pay 7.2K for Ian Schiffelin. He is a Q winning type play because, like I said, nobody will roster him. PJ Hall gets all the hub, and rightfully so. Joey Girard takes all these shots. You've got, some solid role players. Jack Clark is probably going to be a very popular value play. We'll get into him in a second. It just doesn't leave any rostership for Ian Schifflin here at this 7-2 price point. But playing the foul card on PJ Hall, if you think maybe he plays less minutes or he can't stay out of foul trouble, Schifflin has a clear, unimpeded path to 30 to 32 minutes, and he is going to be the top rebounder of the game. They got to get Malik Brown into foul trouble for this to work. I think they will. But Ian Schifflin, without Malik Brown on the floor and possibly even without PJ Hall, we could be looking at like a 15 rebound game. Yes, I am the king of hyperbole sometimes, but this is a real stat that could happen for Schifflin. We'll take a look at his rebounding props if it's being offered. He is a phenomenal overall option. He has a combined rebounding rate well over 40%, top 25 in both offensive and defensive rebounding efficiency. 8th best offensive rating in the country, means he gets a ton of bunnies, a lot of putbacks. He's very comfortable under the rim. He also can shoot the three a little bit. 20 attempts, he's made 11. Just enough to be dangerous, just enough to get slow-footed big men benched, but he bangs enough down low to make soft, weak big men, Grant Nelson, end up hating their life. So Ian Schifflin is that sneak. I don't know that I'm going to designate him posh play of the day or anything, but he is a very sneaky play. Oh, okay. Number 23. Yes, sir. All right. He's the Mania winner, number 23. Love it. Oh, Don, is that Don Place? I gotta imagine that's my guy Don Place. In the show, can you talk about 2 games you think will cover the spread for tomorrow? Sure. All right. So Schifflin the sneak. You have Joey Girard at a really solid price, 6'4", Chase Hunter at an even more solid price of 5'7". Both are middling plays. Girard, high usage guy playing against his old team. There'll be some pep in his step there. If you're into the revenge narratives, which I sometimes am, I'm a recovering revenge narrative connoisseur. I don't care about it as much as I used to, but I definitely think there's some merit here to Girard, wanting to absolutely style on Syracuse here. So expect him to take a lot of extra shots there. If you're going to use somebody, not PJ Hall or Ian Schifflin and not Jack Clark, then I think it has to be Girard. Now, Jack Clark started. He's priced at 4-2, started last game over Chauncey Wiggins, played 33 minutes against North Carolina. They did win. Jack Clark is a very, very solid basketball player. If you haven't watched him play before in any of his various stops, he is a type of guy there that doesn't impact the box score as much, which is tough for our game, right? But he plays a lot of minutes because he's always defending the other team's best player, whether it's a wing or a front court. He always slams the glass. He's always boxing out. He's not afraid to take the shot. He's a great defender. Well, I shouldn't say great, but he's a better than average defender when he's not hurt. The problem is he has not been able to stay healthy throughout the course of his career. But if he continues to start here, and I think he will, you'll probably see a very chalky play here in Jack Clark going up against a Syracuse team that he should be able to do some damage against. 30-plus minutes for him at 4-2, knowing what he can do as long as he doesn't get hurt. He just makes way too much sense. He is a very, very easy play there. Looking at the sheet here, let's see. Yeah, so, 30 minutes, you don't even need me to tell you that. It's like 5x. Easy. All right, moving on to the next game here. Creighton and Xavier, 154 total. Got him as a pick 'em. My dad used to say, a pick 'em. Creighton can't defend anyone. Xavier doesn't have anyone to defend the front court. This is a game that will probably sail over. Now, Creighton has been a 3-man team for a while. They brought Stephen Ashworth in over from Utah State to be their 4th guy and kind of take some pressure off of Kalkbrenner, Baylor Shireman, and Trey Alexander. Very slow going, took some time. He goes from being basically a semi-alpha at Utah State to 4th and 5th in the pecking order. So it's taken some time for him to really figure it out. But my God, he has woken up, and all of a sudden he is playing every minute of the game along with Baylor and Trey Alexander, and he is just scoring at will, and he's hitting the threes, which is what they brought him in to do, and again, take that pressure off. So we're talking about Stephen Ashworth going from being a easy ignore all the time at like 5.5 and doing nothing to now being technically in consideration here at 7K up against a Xavier team that's going to make it very, very fun. Now, I'm probably not going to be using him at that 7K price point. I'm still a little bit leery of him. It's like if I was late to the party at some of these cheaper prices, then I'm probably not going to go there now. But clearly, he's in this role where they're going to play their 4 starters all 35 to 36 minutes at minimum, and they're going to rotate out Mason Miller with Fran Farabello, a little bit of Trout, sometimes Frederick King, but otherwise the 4 starters are going to play every single minute, and that makes them extremely good plays even at these high prices. You no longer can stack them, though, because you're talking about 9.3 for Shireman, 9K for Alexander, and a reasonably priced 8.5 for Ryan Kalkbrenner, which should be a coast into 30 fantasy point game against a Xavier front court that just doesn't have the chops, physicality, or the ability to hold him. Now, I want more than that from him at 8.5, but I think that's the floor we're talking about on Kalkbrenner there at 8.5. Looking at Creighton, yeah, he projects the absolute best. If we give him 37 minutes, which might even be low, we're talking about a guy here putting up a 40 plus number. Alexander, Baylor, both projecting quite well. This is a great game against Xavier. All of these guys should be just absolutely the nuts. Like I said, you can't fit them all into your lineup, but they're very good options. There is Fran Farabello at 3.7K. Not a very exciting option if you need to get some Creighton exposure, but you can't pay for one of those, shiny toys there. He is at least interesting. Played 28 minutes against Butler, 34 against Providence, which did go the extra period to keep in mind, but we're talking about the opposite of a high fantasy point per minute player. He could play 30 plus minutes and maybe give you a score of a 9, but at 3.7, at least he's on the floor. And I fall back on my classic dubism. It's less about his actual score and more about the guys he allows you to fit. It's my Ben Stein impersonation, Bueller. So that's kind of how I'm approaching Creighton. I want Ryan Kalkbrenner for the DVP, and then if I'm absolutely desperate for value, I'll play a little Farabello, but I won't like it. Xavier side, it's a 3-man lineup, which is what Creighton used to be before Ashworth woke up. Quincy Olivari, who's priced just so uncomfortably high at 9.2. Davion McKnight at 7.8. And then our show favorite, Des Cloud, who at 7.5 is the obvious, to me, best play because I just want to take the cheapest of the 3. Now, Olivari's usage rate and shot rates have ballooned to such an astronomically high level. Did warn against, jumping right into him after the DePaul game where he put up 71, which was stupid. And then going up against Villanova where, he's going to play all these minutes, much tougher spot. He shot 4 of 10. He got checked a little bit. The game was very low scoring. He put up 26. So as far as payups go, he's still lower on the totem pole for me against all the other payups. I think most people would come to that conclusion too. But he is a nice large field GPP alt build type of play because he does have it in his bag to put up 40 plus real points. It just, like I said, it's a quite an uncomfortable price to pay for him, and it's not one that I'm typically going to do. Dez is my guy. That's who I want at 7.5. I'm going with a more balanced approach. He's definitely a flagship play and somebody who I like a lot here against Creighton, especially with Creighton failing often to play defense on anybody. That game against Providence, in which they lost to a very short stack team that, has the Josh Oduro, Devin Carter show. Carter puts up 28. Oduro puts up 32. Nobody else on the team scored more than 10. Just 2 guys absolutely ripping and running. And that's not the only time Creighton's given up these slate melting scores. They gave up almost 100 to Butler, 90 plus to Seton Hall. Granted, that went to triple overtime. 60 something to DePaul, which might as well be 100. So this is not a team that is playing very good defense right now, especially for a Greg McDermott coach squad. There is a little bit of merit to Usman, who is priced fairly at 5.3. That's a really borderline underpriced Abu Usman, but I fear he won't get a good whistle here against Kalkbrenner. He did have 4 fouls in 22 minutes at Creighton. Now it's at Xavier this time. He is a big-time shot blocker, which should suit him well against Creighton's driving style, but he's not going to be blocking the shot of Kalkbrenner. And I just don't think he's going to end up having a very good game. So he's going to be one of those ones that projects well because he's such a cheap price, and it's technically one of those buy low spots. But it is a horrible DVP for him individually. I'd rather take the Xavier guards, if anything. And if you really want to get cute, Dallin Swain, who has played very well. He played 26 minutes against Creighton, put up almost 25 fantasy points, 24 against Villanova recently, 8 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. His minutes have been trending up. He is somebody that I do have interest in as a cheap value look, guard forward eligibility as well. All right, next game on the slate here, Vanderbilt versus South Carolina. Now, this is a low total. It's under 130. It's a regular Virginia game over here. South Carolina, 11-point favorites against Vandy. Now, both of these teams, we have been using guys from pretty consistently. They've been panning out quite well. I'm absolutely in love with this South Carolina team right now. They're 20-3. Lamont Paris is just like the most phenomenal job ever. Last year, they were 11-21 with G.G. Jackson. This year, he brings in some of his own guys. They're 20-3, absolutely ripping through the SEC. Road wins against Tennessee and Georgia and Arkansas. Recently just beat Ole Miss, which they were controlling that game the entire way. They almost blew it at the end, but they did end up holding on 68-65. A quality win over Missouri. They beat Kentucky at home. Like, this South Carolina team just keeps on doing it. If they don't, make the tournament, it'll be a damn shame, but there's still plenty of time for them to collapse. Hopefully they can keep it going. And this is a very winnable home game that they should not lose. They do play Auburn on Wednesday, technically a look-ahead spot, but I think Lamont Paris will have them ready. Part of the reason South Carolina is so successful, they're playing at one of the slowest paces in the country, certainly in the SEC and across the board, 354th in tempo, top 40 defensive efficiency. They are just very content slowing teams down, and they are putting it in such a way that, like the Kentucky team, Kentucky scored 62 against them. And we're talking about a Kentucky team that has scored 100 plus. I think it was like 5 times or something like that. Completely putting their will on these teams. So Vanderbilt's going to struggle. Like I actually fear for Vanderbilt to even score 50 in this game. That's a real worry for me on them. So I'm obviously not looking to play too much Vanderbilt in this spot against South Carolina. There has been some Vandy guys we've been very high on, Ezra Mannion, but he's priced up a little bit now. Tyron Lawrence is priced up. Then Alan Lubin's had some nice games. But overall, I think that the slate's too big, and there's too many good spots for us not to have to get involved with Vanderbilt. So I'm not going to waste too much time talking about them. I do have interest in South Carolina guys. Colin Murray-Boyles, that is a FTN brand favorite play. We have been on him since day one. And as soon as he got into the starting lineup, we were super hype and been using him each and every slate pretty much in some form or fashion, some capacity. Now he's priced at almost $7K, and he doesn't play the largest amount of minutes. He's not out there for 35 minutes a night, but his efficiency is just ridiculous against all comers. Georgia, Ole Miss's front court, he took care of business. Now, he did struggle against Tennessee. Even though they won that game, he wasn't able to stay on the floor for very long. But I throw that one out, and you look at what he did against Kentucky, 6 real points, but 33. Against Missouri, 7 real points, but 31 fantasy points. He doesn't need to score to put these big numbers up. But the last 2 games, he scored 16 real in each, and you've seen him easily cross the 30-point threshold. Looking at the Vanderbilt squad, their rebounding numbers are awful. They are not a great rebounding team whatsoever. This is going to be an opportunity for Murray-Boyles to rack up a lot of one-and-done possessions for Vanderbilt, clean up the glass, and get a very high number. And on the other side of the token, getting some easy putbacks and offensive rebounding second and third chances. looking at the youngster who I think is going to be a first-team All-SEC candidate next year at this continued trajectory for the freshman. 23% usage rate, 20% shot rate. He does have a combined rebounding rate of 27%, block rate over 4%. He's not even that, like, he's like 6'7", 6'8", so it's not like some hulking beast of a player. He's just super athletic, and I love the way he plays. He has in conference games only, so 10 of his 17 played in SEC play. He actually has the 14th best assist rate, believe it or not. We like our wing front court players to act as a quarterback, and he does that. 9th best defensive rebounding rate, 13th best offensive rebounding rate. So Colin Murray-Boyles in SEC play is getting it done. He's priced up. He's not a lock type of play. He's not even a core play, but I'm going to continue to get exposure out there, and he's not even going to project all that high because the extended price, but I still think he coasts into 30 there, and it's a very safe option if you want somebody that fits that bill, and he is in that price range, which typically ends up being a last man in range. Michi Johnson is only 6.3K. Now, Michi's been kind of hit or miss for us, but as the price keeps dropping, we have to just keep rolling him out there. And it's not as if he's been horrible. You throw out the Missouri game in which he was bad, 0 for 9 from the field. Followed it up with 1 of 8 shooting against Tennessee and only had 3 real points, but he still put 24 to the board. Now he scores 26 against Ole Miss, fantasy points wise, but only 6 real. He is actually really struggling with this shot, but he is making up for it in other ways, whether that's racking up steals. His rebounding number has exploded greatly, and he has taken much more of a facilitator role from Talon Cooper, which is the role he normally has. And Cooper's been scoring a little bit more. So with Michi Johnson's shot not falling, he has found other ways to be productive, and that has kept him on the floor for 30-plus minutes. There's going to be a game where Michi wakes up and hits 60% from the field, knocks down 3, 4, 5 triples. And when he does, you're not going to want to be on the wrong side of rostering him because he's going to drop a 40 spot, and it's going to be a Q winner or a tournament winner, and you're going to be like, damn, why didn't I stick with him? He had that stretch in late November, early December where he just was unfathomably hot. 44 against Clemson, 41 against George Washington, 41 against Notre Dame. And I know 2 of those 3 teams aren't scaring anybody, but still that shows you just how hot he could be. 9 of 15, 9 of 16, and 8 of 16 in those games. So it's not as if he had to take 30 shots to get there. He is capable and he can score. He's just in a cold streak right now with his shot. But I love the fact that he is doing other things to contribute as a, obviously, fantasy contributor for us, but also to help his team continue to win games. That means he'll be on the floor. Talon Cooper is priced higher at 6'7". He's been taking on more of a scoring role, less of a facilitator role. He did have 8 assists against Georgia, but we see they're kind of flip-flop there. Cooper's been fine. He's steady. He's consistent, but we're taking that discount on Michi Johnson every single time. BJ Mack is priced at only 6K. That is a big price drop for him. He's been pretty mediocre the last couple of games, but his shot volume is still there. You see 9+ shots in each of the last 5. He's also going through somewhat of a cold streak there, much like Michi. The problem with him is he's not making it up in other ways like Michi does. His rebounding numbers have somehow gotten worse, despite the fact that they keep winning games, and he's non-existent in stocks and assists. So it makes it hard to get behind BJ Mack whatsoever. Maybe some GPP shares there at 6K because that is such a cheap price, but the emergence of Colin Murray-Boyles makes it to where BJ Mack's not getting those heavy minutes, and they're also starting to give guys like Josh Gray, Morris Ugas, those type of guys additional minutes off the bench, which is coming straight out of BJ Mack's total. So that's not ideal for him. I only have him at 21 minutes, and that's not even making value even at his cheap price. Miles Tude at 4.2. He is a certainly respectable value option there. He was hot in that game against Ole Miss. Didn't provide much in the way of peripherals, so he didn't put up a big score there, right around 18, but that has made his price there at 4.2. Sticking with the revenge narrative there, if you will, you have a Miles Tude play who spent 3.5 years at Vanderbilt, so maybe he'll be looking to do a little bit of extra damage there. He's mainly just a spot-up shooter at this point of his career. He's shooting 43% from long range, which is the second best of his career. 2 years ago for Vandy, he shot right around 43. So I definitely don't mind him there. There are worse values to look at. I would much more prefer him to get back into the starting lineup there and see those minutes start to trend back up. He was a starter prior to missing 3 games there with the injury, and he came back way faster than he was supposed to. He's supposed to be out for like 4 weeks. He ended up missing like 2. So maybe that has a little bit to do with it. He's not quite ready to be a starter yet, but he has played 20 plus minutes in 2 of his last 3 games since he's returned. As a starter pre-injury, he was playing around 28 to 29. So we'll keep an eye out there for him as a starter. As of now, he has given his starting spot up. Not that he's given it up, but Zach Davis has been the one starting. But Zach Davis played 20 minutes compared to Miles 23. So we might be seeing a slight shift there. Jacoby Wright also picked up minutes while Miles was out, but he's down to 15 in their last game. So I think we're starting to see the tide turn here. Miles might be primed and looking at a start. So that gives us another value option that we can look at there to bolster the rest of our lineup. All right, moving right along here to the next one. Illinois versus Michigan State. Now, Sparty's 3.5 point favorite, total of 146, whatever. I at the end of April, right, like before summer, I DK Sportsbook opened up and I was like giddy about it. And the first bet I made was a future on Michigan State. And I don't even know. And looking back at it now, it's like, why did I do that? But at the time, I felt like a genius for them to make the Final Four. And it felt like such a lock for it to happen, too. They have a great guard play. Their backcourt of Tyson Walker, AJ Hoggart, like you can't beat it. A sneaky wing and Malik Hall who can shoot, rebound, do a little bit of everything. The most underappreciated forward in the country. Jaden Akins, spurns the NBA to come back. They've got a freshman group coming in that, has talent in Xavier Booker. We know that Tom Izzo's probably not going to use them very much, but they've got that talent. And then they get smacked in the face by James Madison to start the season. And then 2 games later, they get smacked by Duke. And it's all of a sudden we're staring at a 14-9 team that may fail to make the tournament. Now, this is a dangerous Spartans team because any team with Tom Izzo is that's left for dead, which is what people are starting to do, is going to be scary. Like, them making a run in the conference tournament and then maybe getting like a 10 seed or an 8 seed or maybe even a play-in game 11. Like, who wants to play Michigan State play-in game 11 seed? Nobody. So that Final Four ticket might still be decent there, but I am quickly losing confidence there. But I'm not ready to write them off. They continue to like come back, right? They beat Rutgers, Minnesota, Maryland 3 in a row. Then they get just bricked by Wisconsin. Then they beat Michigan, Maryland. Then they get bricked on the road by Minnesota. So this is a very interesting game for them. The first time they played Illinois, they lost by 3 on the road. Ken Pom has it as a 1-point win for Michigan State. I do think that spread is a little bit too high at 3.5. I think this is going to be a 1-point game, last possession type of game. So I am inclined to probably take Illinois there if I was to bet it, or sprinkle the money line. I know Scott loves hearing that. But it seems like a pretty tough spot there to trust Michigan State as of now. So that's the betting part of it. For DFS, there are a bunch of like really solid options, but nobody that I'm like, we got a roster. Terry Shannon at 7-1, high usage, all everything guard. That's a good price for him. He is not a mandatory play by any stretch of the imagination, especially not on the road against Sparty's perimeter defense. But we know there's going to be volume there. If the game's close, he's going to be the one taking free throws at the end. Like, he's the play to own from Illinois easily. And you have Ty Rodgers there at 6'2", just won our guy Scott a seat. That's too high for me. I think he's a little bit too risky at that price. I'd rather use like Quincy Guerrier at 6K instead. You have Marcus Domask, you have Coleman Hawkins, who both of those guys have been awesome this year, but both priced, a little bit too high for me. So I just don't find myself getting to any of the Illinois guys on this slate because there are so many better environments and the prices they're not that advantageous. Coleman Hawkins could easily put up a 40 and paying off that 8K, but there's that opportunity cost word again. He did have 15 and 7 against Sparty last time they played, and that was a pretty good outing for him, 39 fantasy points. So have to be in consideration, but on the road there, I have a little bit of concern. Marcus Domask, very safe at 7.5, probably putting up a 30 plus, playing 38 minutes. Don't mind him, but again, opportunity cost there. Can we get those points for cheaper? Terry Shannon is the only one I feel like if there's going to be a true slate breaker from the Illinois side of this game, it's going to be him. So he's one that I certainly want to sprinkle some exposure there. And if Quincy Guerrier is getting written off by the masses, I will have some probably above field exposure there too, because the 6K price point for him is a little bit cheap. He still has that Oregon stink on him, which, never truly leaves you. But he is somebody that is absolutely got to be in consideration here, considering the fact that he was pushing 8K there just a couple of weeks ago. 30 plus fantasy point upside, 5X, gotta like it. All right, on the Spartan side, Tyson Walker and AJ Hoggard, those are your two primary guys to look at whenever Sparty's on the slate, and their prices are pretty appealing. Overall, the matchup, I think, is neutral, but Walker at this price of 7.2, there's a lot of safety and upside there. Hoggard at 6.9, a lot of upside. I love Malik Hall. I think the 6.2 price for him going in this matchup is kind of sneaky. He's had some real nice games for us in that spot before. Not the safest main team look in the world. He did have 14, 7, and 3 against Illini the first time, 36 minutes. If we're talking about those kind of minutes staying out of foul trouble, then I think he pays off this 6.2. So I like the prices on several of these Spartans players. Tyson Walker at 7.2. He's the one, if it gets into a battle, a one-on-one guard battle, Terry Shannon trading buckets with Tyson Walker, that could be a fun little mini stack game in GPPs. Walker shot 8 of 17 against Illini in the first matchup, only 21 fantasy points, so he wasn't great, but don't be fooled. He can fill it up in a hurry, and we've seen him do that. Hoggard, he's a little bit less of an exciting play there for 300 less. More of the peripheral guys, less of a scorer. Now, he put up 16, 6, and 3 against Illinois in their first bout, right around the same price at 7K. He is somebody whose assist prop, our guy Stills in the Discord, has been hitting the over on a lot, so we'll look at that. But overall, as a DFS play, I would rather just play Walker or down the hall myself. We do have some value in Trey Holloman, who's locked into 20, 25 minutes there, secondary guard role. Has had some troubles lately. They've had some tougher matchups, but he does have a very safe role there as a additional value play that you can possibly look at. All right, next game on the slate here, we've got Providence and we've got Butler. Now, the total on this one is 147, and right now, on DK at least, it's Butler 4. Now, I think it opened at 5.5. At least that's what Butler superfan Rob said. And then I saw 3.5 in other places. Now, I'm kind of alluded to it earlier. I didn't even allude to it. I said it. There are a ton of unsubstantiated or unverified rumors that Providence will be without Josh Oduro. Now, they're already without Bryce Hopkins. They have no depth to speak of. They have no consistency outside of Oduro or Carter. They've got guys who have flashed in Jaden Pierre and Ticket Gaines, but if they don't have Josh Oduro, then Devin Carter, I think he becomes probably like a must play because he's gonna take so many shots. But I think you also just go and run a large, sizable bet on Butler to win the game. This is one that does not profile well for Providence at all without Oduro. With Oduro, I think they cover and possibly have a chance to win. Without him, that's going to be tough because they're going to throw Posh onto Carter one way or another. They're going to let him just, get in his shorts time after time. And Carter's going to have no real other outlet to kick it out to. There's, Oduro can step out and hit jumpers as a big. That's a very versatile player that doesn't get enough credit there, and that versatility makes him very hard to defend. They don't have that without him. They're going to have to play Rafael Castro, heavy minutes, who is a tough kid, but not the same player, not the same level of scorer, obviously, as Oduro. That's going to be a really, really tough loss. They also have been giving minutes to Rich Barron, who's somebody who'd be standing in line to play 20-plus minutes, low volume guy as well. So really no threats. They would need Jaden Pierre to shoot a ton, and he would oblige. Would probably be seeing him at 5'3", taking 15-plus shots next to Devin Carter. So that's somebody to consider. Ticket Gaines will have to dig deep and have one of his really stellar games like he had against Seton Hall, not his typical 15 to 16 fantasy point game. He's really cheap at 5'8" for what it's worth. And then Corey Floyd or Garvey Duell, one of those guys will have to step up. Now, Floyd played 37 minutes against Creighton in the overtime there and did play one of his better games in quite some time, shot 13 times. So at 4'3", Corey Floyd doesn't play the same position. I know that as Oduro, but they're going to have to route a lot of that usage to those guys because it's not as if Castro is going to come in for Oduro and take all those shots. He's going to take minutes, yes, but those shots are not going to go to Castro. They're going to go and be routed to Pierre, Floyd, Gaines, and more on Devin Carter's plate. So we'll see if that actually ends up being the case there. There are mid-sized Twitter accounts that are running with this rumor. So it's not official, and I don't know if it's actually the case. I know that he has a pregnant partner, but I had heard that she wasn't due for another week. So it may be nothing. It may be something. We'll find out. We'll know more in the morning. That game does lock. It's the second wave of games, 11 a.m. PST. So it's at 2 p.m. for those of you on the West Coast. So you'll definitely want to be checking in the Discord there. We'll have that news. I'm going to make the projection sheet as if Oduro is going to play his normal minutes. But if that, what I'll do is I'll put together without Oduro, and I'll take a screenshot for the Discord of what I think the minutes would be and who would be stepping up. That way you have option A with Oduro, option B without, and you'll be able to make that decision because by the time we get the news, we may only have 3 or 4 minutes to decide. Although if he's not there, then it should be obvious. We just need the beats to do their job. Devin Carter at 9.4. It's a high price. He took 19 shots against Creighton, 63 fantasy points. He's just an absolute monster. Obviously not coming back to college after this. It's a damn shame. I wish he would, but this guy's playing himself into a lotto pick. NBA draft Twitter is going, gaga for Devin Carter, the way he's matured from his time at South Carolina to now Providence and just turned himself into such an amazing player. I hope the Friars are able to lock in a tournament spot and we get to see Devin Carter on the big stage because he's going to have some really stellar outings in the tournament if so. And if not, they make the NIT, then, we'll just cheer for him there. But we're talking about a guy without Oduro that may put up legitimately 30 shots. Again, with the hyperbole, I know, but where are those shots going to go? Floyd can only take so many. 13 seems like his high water mark. Can you live with Floyd taking 20? Probably not. Carter's going to have to take a ton. He's going to have to just generate foul after foul. He's going to have to get to the foul line. He's going to have to turn defense into offense. He's taken 16 threes in the past 2 games with Oduro. Without Oduro, he's liable to take, 15 triples. The only problem is Butler will know that, and they'll have Posh harassing him. So that's a tough matchup individually for anyone, but volume-wise, there's just incredible amount of upside there for Devin Carter. On the Butler side, their guys are all mostly priced up, which makes it a little bit tough here. Now, on paper, the matchup against Providence, it's not great, but you're talking about a top 15 defense. But with them being so short-handed, they're not quite that level of defense to where we need to be totally afraid of them. Now, Butler played extremely well on the road against Yukon and gave them a game. They ended up losing 71-62. Jamil Telford has been on quite the run as an offensive, scoring machine. Put up another 17. DJ Davis has been knocking down threes with reckless abandon, scored 21. Posh Alexander came back from his short absence. He was fairly decent defensively on Tristan Newton, which obviously affects his offense because he doesn't have as much energy there. But he did have 8 points, 5 assists, and 5 rebounds. And then we saw more minutes off the bench for Andre Screen and Finley Bizjack. Jalen Thomas, who is a starter, his minutes have slowly been dwindling down until now it looks like they're playing Andre Screen more. Expect to see Posh, DJ Davis, Pierre Brooks, and Jamil Telfort play 32-plus minutes. They're just going to rotate that center spot between Serene and Thomas. And then they're going to use Bizjack as the, water break guy for the other positions. I think that's how they'll continue to operate here. Landon Moore was seeing additional minutes, but with Posh around, there's not really a spot for him. So expect Butler to, utilize still a short rotation as well and not try to just, run Providence ragged. Telford's there at 7.5. That's a little bit tough for me. I don't think we need to pay that price point for him. He's been really good, but opportunity cost, the word of the show, that's just way too much. I would rather use Posh at 6.8, which is a really nice price for him overall because of his strong peripherals, or DJ Davis at 7K because he has been so red hot. But even that 7K price is a little bit tough there. You did get the guard forward eligibility with Pierre Brooks, and he's a reasonable price at 6.5, or you can take a shot with a value in Andre Screen at 4.1, or if you believe Jalen Thomas at 4.9 is going to return to bigger minutes. I don't believe that. I think Andre Screen at 4.1 playing 20 minutes is a reasonable value option here going against a Providence team that might be missing Josh Odoro. So keep that in mind. All right, TCU versus Iowa State. Hey, Steve Boyton. Yeah, it definitely is, man. I Butler 3.5 looking better and better. We'll see what happens there with that news, but seems to be one that we might want to get in tonight, depending on what risk tolerance people have. All right, Iowa State 7.5 point favorites per DK, total of 143. The Cyclones, I love this Iowa State team. They don't get a lot of rostership these days, especially on slates where it's just massive amounts of talent like this. So we might get ourselves a little bit of Tamin Lipsey lower rostership. Now, I say that, and he's only 7.6. People will be able to figure out that he's such a great play, and maybe he will be a little bit higher owned, and he's in a fantastic spot here at home against TCU. When Lipsey was out, we saw the re-emergence, I should say, of Keshawn Gilbert, and we saw Curtis Jones figure out, how to channel his max self. But Lipsey back, looking healthy. Now, there was the questions going into that game against Texas, because I had cored Tamin Lipsey. There was a lot of other options there, but really liked him there at that 7.1 price. Questions of Discord about if he was really actually healthy. I had said I thought he was good to go. No restrictions. You'd seen he looked a little bit hesitant against Baylor, but no problem against Texas. Took 12 shots, played 34 minutes, really productive, 12, 7, and 5, had the 4 steals. The type of stat line that you expect from a healthy, 35-minute per game Tamin Lipsey. I really like him at this spot here at 7.6. It's a bit of a weird price, I think, with the considerable amount of payups that there is. There are some definitive values that we've identified, but there's probably some uncomfortable values that people will have to roster to be able to fit maybe a third pay up option. And I think that goes above the 8K range. So if we can get a lower roster to Tamin Lipsey for later on in the slate, I feel pretty good about that. I know some people are worried about if his health was there. Keshawn Gilbert's some reemergence and taking usage away from him. But you saw in that Texas game, Lipsey really took back over that alpha spot, and that's when the Cyclones are really honestly at their best. So Lipsey is the guy that I'm going to be all over here. I do still like Curtis Jones as a semi-value there at 5.4. He's still playing a ton of minutes with Lipsey. Not going to give us a ton in terms of peripherals. He's going to be a shot guy, but 10 shot attempts there against Texas, 12 against Kansas, 8 against Baylor. Those shots are falling. You can very easily pay this off, and he was priced above 6K for the last couple of weeks. So you're getting a little bit of a discount there for Curtis Jones, but understand there if it's a cold shooting night, probably not going to get there. TCU, this is a really good TCU team, definitely, but man, for DFS purposes, it's really been kind of a weird situation because they're clearly better bringing Jameer Nelson and Jacoby Coles off the bench, and Trevion Tennyson, I got to give him all the credit in the world because I did not expect him to come into the Big 12, after playing for Corpus Christi for a couple of years and play this good. I expected him to be one of those up transfers that was kind of stiff and doing, kind of what we see Timberlake doing over for Kansas. But he's shooting almost 50% from long range. top 10 offensive rating in all of the Big 12, top 5 in true shooting percentage and effective field goal, top 20 in steal percentage. So clearly the move of Tennyson to the starting lineup here about a month and a half, 2 months ago over Jameer Nelson is paying dividends, and it was the right call. Probably why Jamie Dixon is the head coach and I'm not. So I got to give it up to him for that. He is a very solid player and way better than I ever thought. This is a pretty terrible spot for me, though. Iowa State, I always mention there's the teams like Houston and Virginia that we try not to target against very heavily. Iowa State is definitely one of those teams for me. Now, I'm not blatantly, fading against them without any research or any context, but you're talking about the fourth best defense efficiency-wise per Ken Palm. Very, very good. They cause a ton of turnovers. They're great at containing perimeter players. They have a litany of bigs that they can clog the paint with. They definitely make it a problem for DFS purposes here. So had this been a road game coming in, maybe a little bit worried. They did play TCU just recently at their house. That was without Lipsy. It was 73-72. Gilbert had the big game. Curtis Jones had a relatively big game. But they did a nice job on Emmanuel Miller, at least for his offensive production. He did fill out the stat line, but they kept him from scoring, which is when they're at their best. Micah Peavy, they kept him under 15. And Trevian Tennyson had the best game, scoring 19 real on 3 of 7 shooting from downtown. Everybody else about 8 to 10. They need a healthy and productive Jacoby Coles to play 20-plus minutes in this one, I think, to be successful. Not sure we're going to get that. He is an interesting price at 4.6 here. He did play 22 minutes against Texas out of necessity there. We saw Uday barely play after the first half, but he only had 20 against Iowa State, and he really struggled to get anything on the glass. Hit a few shots there. Looked like he might turn in a semi-decent game, but the second half kind of got away from him. I think this team is better with Coles in the lineup, but obviously, like I said, I'm not their head coach. But I do like him for a GP value. I think he's an interesting kind of guy to have like 15 to 20% of, depending on how many lineups you run in the mini-max, for example, or if you max anything else out. He is one that wouldn't surprise me for him to pay off that 4.6 price, even if nobody else on this TCU team does. Tennyson at 6.4. Every time I write him off, he produces. And again, he had a pretty nice showing of 30 against Iowa State, but I'm just not that interested in using him whatsoever. All right, BC versus Duke. We're rounding out the last couple of games here. Duke 12-point favorites, total of 148. Boston College, they do have a bit of value here. It's kind of getting to the point where he's not really usable, but he's a cheap starter and he continues to play minutes. And we're talking about Chaz Kelly. Might be in line for even more here, depending on the status of Prince Aligbe. Did suffer an ankle injury against Florida State after, only 4 minutes to play. Does come into it as highly questionable, but we'll see how that works out here in the morning and what happens during warmups. Without him, we can expect Kelly to maybe start to push back towards 30 minutes again, like he played against Syracuse. 4.4K remains a starter there. Claudell Harris would probably get back into the lineup playing big minutes, and then we'd see Mason Madsen likely play somewhere between 24 to 25 minutes as well, which at 4.8, Madsen would be a realistically viable value to use in your main lineup as well, depending on how that news shakes out and what the actual starting lineup is. So we have some news to track there, and we have some cheap options to look at depending on what Prince's status actually is. Now, as far as the other options on BC, Quentin Post at 8.3. This is a cheap price for him, but I'm extremely worried about foul trouble on the road. The Duke refs, as I like to call them. We'll see what the ref assignments are in the morning, but there just seems like no planet or timeline in which Post doesn't pick up 2 early fouls here against Duke and their plethora of refs that do what they want. So I say that in jest, only half. I'm kind of half serious there as that as well. Post went off against Florida State. We had a bunch of him there. I'm not necessarily scared about using him against Duke, but I am scared about using him at Duke, if that makes sense. So keep that in mind there if you plan to use Quentin Post, and I am a big Q Post fan, have been for many, many seasons. If he gets into foul trouble, look to Devin McLaughlin to play all the minutes in the world. He has played 35-plus minutes in 4 straight games. Priced at $7K, which may make some people shudder if they haven't been paying attention to what BC has been doing. But he's certainly a guy worth looking at that price there, especially if you think it will play out a certain way with post. Over the last 4 games, especially, he has been phenomenal. Looking at his rates, he doesn't have the best overall usage, but he does have top 4 in the ACC for offensive rating, true shooting percentage, and effective field percentage. And he's top 20 in block rate, if you can believe that. And he's shooting 69% on 2-point field goals, which is the 5th best mark in the conference. So a highly efficient scorer that Devin McLaughlin is. Not the highest usage guy, but he does make the most of his opportunities. He's also shooting almost 43% in conference from long range on 21 attempts. So McLaughlin has definitely stepped up in conference play. He would be a guy to certainly look at, especially if you're running those mini-max lineups. You want exposure there somewhere. On the Duke side, the big question would be how much Kyle Filipkowski do you want to have? And I think you want to have a lot. 7.9K is a really foolish price. I will admittedly say that I'm not the biggest flip guy. When he's priced at 9K and 9.5 and all his prices, like I don't normally go out of my way to roster him. But at 7.9, that's just a dumb price. I would expect him to be uber highly owned in the 250Q. Any single entry contest that you enter, there's just a ton of upside there. He has been under 30 DK points in 4 straight, but I don't really care about that. We're talking about an opportunity here to absolutely melt the slate. Those times, think of the times when Armando Bacot dropped below 8K, Joel Soriano dropped, like all the times he just kept on pushing and forcing him in regardless of matchup and the opportunities and how Bacot wasn't getting the ball. Soriano's getting into foul trouble, not getting the ball. What's wrong with these guys? Like, you just don't argue with the price like that. There's certain spots, like if he would have been playing Virginia, I still would be like, damn, we gotta use him. And he's playing Boston College. So this is just going to be a really easy play. Really nothing else for me to say there at 7.9. Unless we wake up and he's like he fractures his foot on the way to the gym or something. It makes it really tough to want to use anybody else at that cheap price. Mark Mitchell, who I love using in GPPs usually because he's such a significant discount and he's such a productive guy. And I've been saying for 2 years now that I think he's going to end up being the best collegiate player from that class. But he's 7.3. He's barely that much cheaper than Flip. He did have a fantastic game against Notre Dame. He won us some tournaments back against Notre Dame last time on January 6th, the Notre Dame killer, I guess. But really 600 more to play Flip. We got to just do that. There is interest for me in Jeremy Roach at 5.9, especially getting back into the starting lineup, playing big minutes. This is their veteran guy. That's a really cheap price for him as well. You can run Flip and Roach lineups late and feel probably pretty good about both of those guys sailing over value in this one. Still like the youngster Caleb Foster. He played 26 minutes against Notre Dame. It was a blowout, probably somewhere between 17 and 20 in this one. But again, another sub 5K guy that you can kind of use to fill out some of your player pool, which will enable you to fit some of those top pay-ups that we've already talked about. All right, next game on the slate here, Texas versus West Virginia. 12-point favorites are the Longhorns, total of 145.5. And I know that the first thing people are going to be asking me, because I always am talking about this guy, is Ray Battle. Am I going to roster him or not? He's been absolutely terrible for about, 3 weeks now. Just can't stop fouling. He's taking horrible shots. He's just in a funk. Now, Jesse Edwards back for West Virginia is a good thing, but that's clearly taken a big piece of the pie away from Ray Battle. But that won't be a bad thing because that should sharpen up his efficiency to a degree. But also it's kind of a bad thing because he's always been a volume scorer throughout the course of his career. AAU, high school, I watched this kid a lot, being from the Pacific Northwest. His time at the Huskies, like he's never been the most efficient guy. He did show that at Utah State. He's just a very true to form volume scorer. So he needs those shot attempts. And it's not as if Jesse Edwards needs to come out and take 18 shots. He did against Cincinnati, and he was great. And that might be what West Virginia needs. And they're going to obviously need him here against this Texas front court in a similar fashion that they needed him against that BYU front court, which still wasn't enough. 16-7, put up 34 fantasy points in 23 minutes, but they did end up losing that game. But they need Ray Battle. I need Ray Battle because I can't stop rostering him. He played 31 minutes against BYU. He took 15 shots, but he still was under 20 fantasy points. And I was kind of hoping that price was going to snake closer to 5. Like it had kept dropping. People not really rostering him, at 5'6", 5'8", and they're tough matchups, right? And he's been awful in tough matchups. Like UCF, they cuffed him. Oklahoma, they cuffed him. Houston, obviously we knew he was going to be terrible there. We didn't use him there because we couldn't. He got absolutely just, contained. But the Cincy and BYU matchups, while tough on paper, weren't, for me, I wasn't disciplined to fade him. And kudos to everyone else who was, because I know he was like 7% owned on those last two slates. And he should have punished people who faded, but he didn't. And that's okay. But I mean, 15 shots at 6K going up against a Texas team that perimeter wise, we've actually had some pretty good success taking guards against Texas. That is one thing that I definitely like to do and will continue to do so. Battle point props at 13.5, 12.5 when they're there. We're still going to hit those overs. Like I'm just going to keep firing away with Ray. I can't help myself. He's not priced up high enough for me to start fading. It's one of those things too, where I'm just being stubborn because the moment I start fading him is the moment he melts the slate. And it's just like, we've been playing this game for many, many, many years. I don't get tilted about too early fouls anymore. I just don't. It happens. But I do still get rattled mentally when I'm on a dude for a long time. And the second I jump off, he goes off. Like that still fucks with my head. So I can't do it. So 6K Ray Battle, we're going to be on him. He doesn't even project that well. Like let's give him 28 minutes. He's right at 3.8, which isn't great. So he probably won't even be that highly owned. That's just one of those plays where I'm just going to continue to fire. Ultimately, I think the return of Jesse Edwards is going to be a good thing. Those two will, they don't have much time to figure it out, but I think they will play well together. Kirk Risa can, get them the rock, and having a low post presence like that, Jesse Edwards will enable Ray Battle to get higher quality looks and less forced shots. At least that's the idea. As far as anyone else on West Virginia, the answer is no. Texas, we definitely want a fair amount of. Anyone going up against West Virginia is going to be in a position to put up some big numbers. Tyrese Hunter is very appealing at only 5'3". This is a situation with them last year. We constantly went through it. It's a buy low opportunity, but is he going to be able to even pay this off? Will he eke his way to 20? And it's another one of those kind of almost stubborn spots where you're just like, I know I have to play him. He's 5'3". That's too cheap, but he's going to play 35 minutes, but he might not get there. Now, his assist rate has spiked lately, which is great, but his shots have just been bricking left and right. Volume still there, though. 0 for 8 against Iowa State, still getting volume, 3 for 9 against TCU. So the shots are there. 5.39, that 5.3 price, that's definitely a value price, and it's a matchup that is very, very good on paper. We don't need a whole lot more than 20 really to call this good. Now, he only played 21 minutes against West Virginia the last time that they played. He put up 10 fantasy points. Like, that's a real possibility of happening here again. But that price really draws us in. We need value. If we don't want to go too many guys under 5K that we're taking chances on, I think Tyrese Hunter makes sense. Kendall Weaver was an easy value because playing all these minutes, they've got him priced up to 5.2 now, and that's kind of a tough decision because 5.2 for Weaver, who we like, but 5.3 for Hunter, who has done it in the past. Weaver hasn't necessarily done it. Yeah, obviously last year for Lamar he did, but we're talking about Big 12 Weaver, who's just now starting to get more minutes, starting over Ithiel Horton, who's broken beyond belief and playing relatively solid minutes. So I don't mind Weaver there, but it's tough for me to sit here and be like, yes, play him over Tyrese Hunter for 100 less. As far as my man Dylan Disu there, whose jersey hangs behind me, 8.6 is a really rough price. It's going to be tough, but we know how good he is. He should be completely unimpeded to the hoop time and time again. Just needs to get Jesse Edwards in some foul trouble, which I think he definitely can. Disu has that versatility to step out and hit threes as well. Very solid. If he stays out of foul trouble, which is sometimes something that rears its ugly head for him, it can really negatively impact your game and your lineup. But man, this is such a great on-paper matchup for him. Where does he rank with the other pay-ups is really where you're going to have to decide, because obviously we're going to talk about Broom here in a second, who we've been riding hard. Devin Carter, who we just got done talking about, he's going to take a million shots. The Creighton guys, PJ Hall, Mark Sears against LSU. Like, there's just a ton of really good pay-up options. And I'm more of a balanced guy, yes, but I'm not going to be, ignoring those guys above 8K. I got to figure out the way to get them in without making too many sacrifices. And I think making a tough decision here to not use Dylan Disu might end up being the right call. But the nice thing is I'm running 150 lineups, so I get my exposure anyways. But if I'm running one lineup and I am playing the queue, one of them, I don't know which yet, if they're full or not. Disu probably won't be in my queue lineup, but I love him. He paid for a washer and dryer last year. Need another appliance coming up here. Need an oven, so I'm going to be looking at Disu here in the next couple of weeks in the tournament too, to pay for that oven. But 8.6 is just a really hard price for me to get behind. Do like Dylan Mitchell at 7K. Perhaps that's our little bit of leverage, there. Mitchell, same reason as Disu, great matchup against that West Virginia front court. He was awful against them in their first matchup. Texas kind of played a weird game against them. Obviously, it didn't work out too well for them because they did lose, but they'll have the opportunity to bounce back here. And I think Mitchell's chances of putting up like a 30-plus score here and exceeding value are quite high. Playing off of Disu has been really, really good for him. And then you have Max A. Smith, all everything guard, 7'4". That's a nice, cheap price for him. High usage, taking a ton of shots, playing every single minute possible. I think people are starting to forget about Max a little bit because he hasn't been putting up these huge scores, and that's exactly this particular matchup where you want to go to him. He put up 46 against West Virginia last time. So with the struggles of Mitchell and a few others there, and they did lose, he was the one that was hard carrying, hit 7 threes in that game. So West Virginia's perimeter D does not have an answer for him. Definitely going to have a large amount of shares of Mad Max here. All right, last game on the slate, Auburn versus Florida. Right now, it looks like Auburn 1.5 point favorites, total of 158 on DraftKings at this very moment. Now, Janai Broom has been our dude for a long, long time. I am totally in love with this kid. He has been one of the best players, from a low post offensive to shot blocking combination player since his Morehead State days. Just like one of the best players to watch. And his game is so silky smooth in the way that he can hit shots from the outside and take guys off the dribble on the low block. And his passing has improved so much this year. His assist rate is up to 23% in conference. Number 1 defensive rebounding mark in the SEC. Like, this is an up transfer now, 2 years at Auburn, and just playing his way into a one of the best players in all of college basketball. Obviously not going to win, the awards over Edey and whatever, but he is number 2 on Ken Palm's Player of the Year rankings right now, and he has absolutely phenomenal rates across the board in all categories. The only knock on him is playing in Bruce Pearl's rotation means he's rarely going to eclipse that 30-minute mark because there's so many guys playing. Now, I have noticed that, and they've been in some blowouts, so this hasn't helped, but I have noticed the rotation starting to tighten up to a degree. We're seeing Broom and Jalen Williams obviously play the most minutes, but Chad Baker, who I really also like watching play a lot, the game against Bama there, he had some foul issues, so he only played 20 minutes. But we're starting to see him play the veteran leader role. He comes off the bench right around 25, 26 minutes. That's going to be usually what he gets. Trey Donaldson has started to separate himself from Aiden Holloway, Denver Jones. We're seeing him slide into about a 24, 25-minute role, whereas before it was, okay, everybody that's not named Janiah Broome or Jalen Williams is going to play 17 to 22 minutes. And we're starting to see a little bit of a definition there with the pecking order. Now, that could change at any time with Coach Pro, but right now I feel pretty confident in that. Obviously, Broome, Williams, Chad Baker, and then Trey Donaldson. And we're starting to see KD Johnson play more. The job that KD Johnson did, and you'll look at Mark Sears' stat line and be like, what the fuck are you talking about? The job he did on Mark Sears individually, defensively, was phenomenal. Now, started to wear down, and as the game goes, like, Sears is going to score his point. Like, that's just going to happen. But if you watch that game, he was harassing the hell out of Sears all game long, and it wasn't until, like, that last maybe, 9-10 minutes where Sears really started to pad his stats. Before that, he was having a hell of a time. KD Johnson was in his shorts. So I was really impressed with the way he'd actually been defending, because over the early part of his career, that wasn't an aspect of his game that you could really count on. But if that is an area where he's going to be relied upon, we should see his minutes start to spike back up too. And I think the DFS community has a special place in their heart for KD Johnson, dating back to his Georgia days, because high usage, high fantasy point per minute player, always cheap. We want to see him do well. And I don't know about you guys, but something for me about this Auburn team, like, I just enjoy seeing them play well. I want to see them go deep in the tournament. A couple of years ago, that team that, Kyle Guy had to knock out, like, I just really like Auburn in the way that Bruce Pearl coaches. And that might be a hot take because a lot of people don't like Bruce Pearl, but this is a fun team. Anyways, as far as payups go, Janiah Broome is 9.5. That hopefully keeps his rostership down. Now, he was uber chalky against Vanderbilt for good reason. The first time against Alabama, he was like, 60%, 8K. That was a dumb price, right? Wasn't as high against Bama this last time because 9.3 price. So that will keep him below 30, which is enough. This Florida matchup is great. Florida is, obviously playing a brand of basketball where they're giving up a ton. Defensively, they're just getting pelted. Their offense has been really fun to watch and great asset for DFS purposes as well, but they are just getting absolutely blitzed by multiple spots. And if Broome can stay out of foul trouble on the road, he should be able to do some really big damage to Florida. But there's always going to be that risk for big men on the road who get a bad whistle. And I really tried to pay attention to ref assignments. It's not easy to find all the time, but there are other refs who are out there trying to lay claim to their recently retired Bo Borowski role of, thinking that the fans are there to see them call fouls. And James Breeding, if you haven't heard me talk about that name on Twitter or on Discord yet, that's the guy to avoid. Usually does Big East games, so we might be okay here, but that is something to be aware of here with Broome. Love him overall as a play. Jalen Williams probably backing off a little bit. 7-1's high. I know he put up 41 recently, but that was a all things going great for him type of game. Career high 26 plus. Typically not going to be looking there. I do like the depressed price on Chad Baker at 6-1, even coming off the bench. And then Trey Donaldson, whose price has come up to 5.7 after putting up 28. He's put up 20 plus in 3 straight. I do think he's, at this point, usurped Aiden Holloway and will continue to play this mid-20s role. Really good fit next to Broome and just, letting things come to him, taking those shots out of those double teams from Broome and being in the right spot at the right time. And he's also been a very good facilitator over the last 2 weeks of the season. So that area of his game has improved and made him a much more viable DFS asset. All right, Florida, nobody above 8K. We got to give it to this Auburn squad, though. Their defense has been nails. They're third for defensive efficiency per Ken Palm now. They're playing at the 64th fastest tempo, so still points to be scored there, but they really did a great job locking back Alabama there, especially in the first half. A lot of those points that Bama scored there in the second came later in the second when the game was pretty much out of hand. You start to see Auburn gas out a little bit, and they had built that big lead. So a lot of the points that they scored were just true garbage time buckets. Now, Florida playing at the 28th fastest tempo. Offensively, they're top 20 per Ken Palm in efficiency. Defensively, 81st. They are a very good offensive rebounding team, one of the best in the country. And overall, they have this kid, Alex Condon, that needs to be playing more minutes and really probably should be starting at this point. Still a freshman. They're starting Micah Hanlogden, who is a sophomore. Probably can't use them both together, two giants, but I think it's time to see what Condon can do. Coming off the bench last game, he still played 27 minutes, so he's essentially getting close to starter minutes off the bench, and they're using him a lot more. High rates, high fantasy point per minute type of guy, somebody that I've been clamoring for to see more minutes a lot lately. We also saw Riley Kugel off the bench play 28 minutes last game, 31 against Kentucky. Might he start to take back his starter spot? Perhaps. We saw him go through some struggles throughout the early part of the season. Now he started to put up some big numbers, but it's hard to really get confident with him because off the bench, you don't really truly know if it's going to be one of those games where he plays 19 minutes or if he plays 32. So it's really tough to get behind using Riley Kugel. He is only 5'3", which is an interesting price for him if he were to play 30-plus minutes, but also factoring in that Auburn defensively could be a real big problem for him. So I'm not going to be as high on a guy like Kugel as others might be. Now, if he jumped in the starting lineup, I could see that might be something that makes us want to get more exposure. It is one of the last games on the slate, though, so there's not going to be a lot of options there if you do try to go that route and he doesn't end up starting. Now, Condon at 5'7", they need him to play quality minutes here against this Auburn front court, and I do think we could see him for the first time in a lot, like all season in his career, get close to 30 minutes. I think he played 30 one other time without going back and looking. I couldn't tell you, but I'm pretty sure it was like once, maybe twice. So a 30-minute Alex Condon at 5'7" with his fantasy point per minute numbers and looking at his overall, let me pull this up here, overall rates compared to, like Micah and everyone else. Now he has a 21% usage rate, but his rebounding numbers are absolutely phenomenal. 34% combined rebounding rate, top 80 in the defensive category there. Block rate of 6.5%, draws about 5 fouls per 40. Now he does get 4.8 fouls called per 40, so that is a number that keeps his minutes down because when he's out there, he is a freshman. Keep that in mind. He's trying to make things happen. He does get into some foul trouble and pick up some dumb ones. That is something that happens. Micah Hanlogden, who has a top 30 offensive rebound or offensive rating and is top 3 in offensive rebounding efficiency, has also been very, very good. Also a high foul rate. So these two haven't been able to coexist together, but what's happening is they cannibalize each other's minutes, but we did see Condon play more last time. So we'll see if that shakes out any differently. I have been reading beat reports and message boards for Florida, and a lot of people feel that way, that it's time for Condon to get those additional minutes. This matchup against Auburn would be perfect opportunity for that to happen. No guarantees, but I think some Alex Condon exposure is a good move for sure. As far as the other guys, I think pricing-wise, like Zion Pullen at 7'9", Samuel at 7'2", and 6'7", Will Richard are all fine. I do have a lot of interest in Walter Clayton at 6'5", but I come back to this matchup just not being very good. Now, Auburn's nowhere near Virginia. We don't have to avoid them by any means. We just saw Sears, after a while in the garbage time, put up some big numbers. This Florida team's a little more erratic. Now, so I'm not super confident in them by any means. I love Florida games because of how they typically play out and are high-scoring affairs. But the Florida guys have been really just mainly GPP looks because of how up and down they've been, or they take turns. Zion Pullen has been one of the more consistent, but you see he's priced at 7'9", which kind of coincides with that. So really, I'm just kind of maybe playing some of the Alex Condon in hopes that I'm right about his minutes spiking to 30. Otherwise, I'm clamoring for the Auburn side and feeling pretty damn good about rostering Broom, Chad Baker, or Trey Donaldson. Auburn has been very, very good to us. All right, that is the slate. Hey, Catherine. I know. It's just like, God, I can't seem to get healthy. I don't know. The damn kids. These damn kids come home and keep bringing a new sickness home every day. But yeah, I'm gonna get a little bit of rest and we'll get back at it. So, like I said, I get talking here and like therapeutic. I don't even feel sick, so I appreciate that. Just get a few more comments out here. Flip under 8K for the first time since non-con of freshman season. Yeah, dude, what the hell, man? What the hell? It's going to be so highly owned. So highly owned. All right, so let's talk about core prize picks, and then we'll get out of here. So obviously, as Boynton said there, like just the dumbest price ever on flip. So that's an obvious core play. Feel like I hate giving out plays like that because everybody's going to use them, but like obviously, if you're running a one lineup thing and you're playing single entry stuff, probably shouldn't be fading him. As far as pay-ups go, though, and who I would take as my top, if there's no Oduro, it would be Devin Carter for me because I think it's going to be a lot of usage. But I think and it's going to be lazy because the highest price guy on the slate. But Janai Broom, with the way he's playing again, getting this matchup against Florida, just feels like another lock for 40 plus fantasy points here. And I think we might see Pearl be more apt to give him like 30 plus minutes. We saw him play 34 recently. Now it's funny because I always say like give Broom 30 plus minutes, he's going to put up 70. And in that 34-minute game, I think he had one of his worst games in the last 5. But 34 against Florida would be a really big outing. So he's actually my favorite pay up of all of them. But depending on the news in the morning and how things shake out, that could change because, like I said, Devin Carter with no Josh Oduro, there's just no other options there to absorb those shots but him. So official core, though, we'll go with this. Tamim Lipsy at 7.6. That's my dude. I have him from a value standpoint at this very moment. He projects the 4th best, not from raw points, but just like as a return of 4.9x. I love him in this spot. I don't think a lot of people will roster him. Would put the Posh play of the day label on him, but I'm not confident that he'll be like 5% owned. I don't think we'll be that lucky. I think we're talking like maybe 15% owned. So I can't really stick that label on him, but I would love for him to be that way. Jack Clark, 4.2, as long as he's starting for Clemson. That's a really obvious one as well. Everyone will be using him, but what can I say? And then Michi Johnson, because I'm stubborn and he's only 6'3", and he is making things happen even during this cold streak. He's going to wake up. He's going to figure out how to make shots again. And when he does, he's going to put up a 40. And if he does so at 6'3" here in a spot against Vanderbilt, where probably nobody's really looking at him, it has the opportunity to be not only a profitable day for you, but a possible seat winner or a big, large field GPP winner on Michi Johnson. So we're going to go Tamim Lipsy and Michi Johnson, maybe some off-the-cuff plays there. I don't know where I stand right now with ownership just yet. And a very chalky Jack Clark. And obviously Philip Gowski is in there, but everyone's going to roster him. All right, let's look at PrizePicks real quick. I will have in the tracker on FTN Daily like 3 or 4 of our top PrizePicks plays, and then over on FTN Bets in the tracker as well for some of the prop betting stuff. And I haven't forgot, Don, about the 2 betting plays that you're looking for. I'll double check lines and get to you on at least one, and then I'll reach out to you after the show too if you want. All right, so again, the night before, there's never fantasy points. They really rarely put any fantasy points. I'm sure they were taking it in the shorts the last 2 seasons. I know we were cracking them on fantasy points for a long time. They don't really offer it too much, and when they do, they give like half the offerings that they do on PRA, which is a very hard stat to get right. PRA is a tough one. It took me a while to figure that out, but I've started to stay away from PRA, and go figure they offer that one the most because it's probably their most profitable. All right, looking at it, we're going to start with points. I like my man Ian Schifflin. You probably didn't think I was going to start with that, but 10.5 points against Syracuse, playing that angle of they got to get one of Malik Brown either on the Syracuse side or PJ Hall on the Clemson side getting into foul trouble. Either of those things happen means Ian Schifflin's going to not only grab every rebound in existence, but he's going to get all those bunny opportunities as well. 10.5 seems like a low mark for him here and really filling that Hunter Tyson-esque role. Keep lazily referring to it as that, but I feel pretty confident about him scoring above 10.5 points. So that's the first one we're going to look at here. Let's see, Michi Johnson. This is the game that he's going to score. He's going to score points here, over 11.5 points. I've been kind of just been hitting that one the last couple of slates, and I know he hasn't been hitting it, but I can't stop. I can't quit Michi Johnson. I just can't, especially not against Vanderbilt. Let's see. What do they got here? They got Flip at 16.5 points. I like that one to a degree. Trevion Tennyson under 11.5. As good as he's been, I don't think he's going to have a very good game this time against Iowa State. Feel pretty good about them. Devin Carter over 18.5 points. That will, if we wake up in the morning, or if you don't sleep like me, and Odoro's literally ruled out and he's going to the birth of his kid, that Devin Carter number won't be available below 20 probably anywhere. So I'd probably hit that one tonight at over 18.5 because he's going to score 20 real points, even if Odoro plays. and then we'll finish with my guy, Ray Battle. 12.5 points against Texas. I told you if it's 12.5 or 13.5, I'm going to continually hit the over on Ray Battle there because even if he's not doing anything else, he's still going to be shooting and scoring points. So maybe he's not the best DFS play anymore until he figures things out, but 12.5 points prop is far too cheap there. If even against Texas, I think that's going to be just fine. All right, that will do it. Thanks to everybody who hung out with me tonight. I know we started a little bit late, very late for those of you on the East Coast. Don't forget to check out Mike Randall, our Chief Content Officer's betting show, his program, as I like to say, in the morning there. Will he be talking about all his bets? Oh, wait, I haven't forgot about you, Don. 1 second. I haven't forgot about you. Let me pull up the... Anyways, while I'm looking for that, don't forget, I think that starts at 1 hour before game locks. He has been absolutely scorching. Over on FTN Bets, Mike Cutry will be popping his prop picks in the Discord, of the betting Discord, as well as the site tracker. He, of course, has been ridiculously good at props, one of the best in the world at it. Coincidentally, does not do PRA, so he's a smart dude. All right, so Butler's -4 on DK right now. You saw in the chat there, Steve mentioned Butler -3.5. That it almost seems like it's too good to be true. If we get Odoro out, that number is obviously going to go, in a poor value spot for you. So if you're looking for action tonight, Don, I would say Butler -4, or if you can find it at -3.5, depending on where you shop around there. I'm just looking at DK at this moment. I don't necessarily like betting on Butler, but I don't foresee Providence being able to win this game or cover that without Odoro, and they might not even do it with him. One other one that I liked, I just want to double check what it is because it's a little risque, but Middle Tennessee, they're +3 versus FIU. FIU has been early in the season kind of a doorstop team. They're 8-15. Play super fast. Their defense is absolutely awful. They gave up that game to the Tarleton State kid, like just a million points. Ken Palm has it 70-66, but I think Middle Tennessee, which is they're also 8-15, but they're a better 8-15. I do think they cover this and actually win outright against FIU, because if you watched, neither team's great, but if you watched FIU play, they're especially terrible at everything. So Butler -4, Middle Tennessee +3. Those are the two I'm hanging my hat on right now, Don. But if you hit me up on Discord or Twitter DMs, I will throw a few more at you as I have time to look at it. And I'll be going to DK book bright and early, like 5 a.m. my time. So anyone awake at that time, feel free to reach out and we can talk through it. Going to work on the rest of the sheets. That will be out early, like 3-4 hours before the slate locks. The breakdown will be out and the projection sheet in the Discord. Definitely check that out. And Mike Randall Show. Appreciate everybody who continues to support the show. Before you head out, please hit that like button for me. I appreciate it. And then we'll be back Monday night, 9 p.m. PST, to break down the big Tuesday slate. It's going to be March Madness before you know it. Let's get it. Green screens for all. Take care.